its students and its educational institutes. So we appreciate you being here tonight. My name is Hassan Jafer, and along with Mr. David Mustanen, Director of Communications for Dearborn Public Schools, we will be presenting the Community Forum presentation tonight. Just to let you know, before we start, there is no penalty if you move to the front, but if you prefer to be in the back, that's okay too. I hope the script will be big enough for you to see in the back. But during our presentations, please feel free to move anytime you want. The format is very simple. We have a short presentation, probably about 15 to 20 minutes presentation. And afterwards, we're going to have a question and answer session. We ask you to come down this aisle over here and state your name and then ask your question. This is important for us because the feedback that we would be taking back with us to the board members will be essential in finalizing a decision. Right from the get-go, we have a disclaimer to share with you. No decisions have been made yet. So all what we have been doing, again, is sharing information and soliciting input from our community. So before we start, there's another important element. If we have any parents or community members who need language assistance, we are so fortunate that we have Ella in the back. She's the lady raising her hand. So please see her, and she'll make sure that you understand every single concept or every single word we share with you tonight. At this point, I would like to give the mic to my partner in crime, Mr. David Mustanen. David?
Thank you, son. Pleasure to be here at O.L. Smith. Thank you all for coming out this evening. Glad to see that everyone didn't take advantage of the warm weather and stay home and put up Christmas decorations, because that's what I was tempted to do. But I said, no, I'm going to come here first. So again, I wanted to thank you for being here. Just quickly, there are several members of the administration who are here this evening. Several of our cabinet members are seated over here. Dr. Yusuf Musallam, who oversees the feeder track for Etzel Ford. And I'm not going to introduce all of you, but there's several of our cabinet members here this evening. There's also a couple of board members here. I know I saw Mr. Barry. I think I saw, yes, Celia Nasser is here. Our superintendent is over at an event at Bryant. He will be joining us as soon as the event over there is done as well. So let's just get going here and kind of get through this presentation. And like Hassan mentioned, we also want to respect everybody's time, so we're going to try to move through this presentation so that we allow a lot of time for questions and comments, but we will kind of wind this meeting down about 7:45 or so, around there, but we will stick around. So if any of you want to come and talk to us individually, please do so at the end. But just out of respect for everybody's time, we will kind of set an end time for the meeting. To start off, sometimes when we talk about schools and that, we get really focused in on our own school and on our own community. And I think it's just important to point out how big this district really is. We are the third largest district in the state of Michigan, 2,700 staff members, 21,000 students. So that's a big district. We are a big district, and there's a lot going on in our district. One of the numbers I really like to point out there is at the bottom, the 4,000 students added in the past 17 years. That's a lot of growth. And that's a good problem to have. That's a good way to be. There are school districts all around us that are going in the other direction, that are losing students. They're closing schools and changing boundaries because they have fewer and fewer students. And that really can handicap a school district, where we are in the other position where we're gaining students. So that's a real positive for us. Speaking of positive items, there's a lot to be proud of to be part of the Dearborn Public Schools. We have programs from our youngest students in the very early preschool ages to our elementary grades, middle school, high school, lots of options for our high school students as well. Collegiate Academy, which offers free college to our students for 2 years. Our STEM middle school program, another really outstanding program that's relatively new to our district. Also, too, down at the bottom, that 93% high school graduation rate. You know, that graduation rate continues to climb over the past 5 years, and that's a number to be proud of. That's higher than most school districts in the state of Michigan. It's a number that we are continually working at to improve and get even better yet. But it really shows that it is not only the success at the high school level, but it is success throughout the entire district. Because for kids to succeed in high school, they have to have that support at the elementary school. It's the early childhood programs, it's the middle school programs. It's really a district-wide effort that has allowed us to achieve those 93% graduation rates. Just as we have a school over on the East End an elementary school, Becker Elementary School, was recently named a Blue Ribbon School by the U.S. Department of Education. They're one of only 13 schools in the state, one of only 365 schools in the country to receive that designation for the success they're having. And although that's one school in our district that's having that success, it really is a picture about the overall success of our district and the things that are going on throughout our schools. So there's a lot to be proud of here in the Dearborn Public Schools, a lot to be proud of to be part of it. And we're glad that all of you are here tonight to be part of that discussion. Just looking a little bit at the enrollment history of the district, 22,600 students, our peak back in 1956-57. Back in the 80s, we had our all-time low, 12,287 students, and now here we are again about another 30 years later, reaching that 21,000 mark. We actually are at that 21,000 student mark. So you can kind of see a little bit of a trend there every 30 years, and really it doesn't really, what this really shows is that communities change, demographics change, people move in and out of cities, and we're no different here in the city of Dearborn. So again, just some factors to some of the things reasons why boundaries change. You know, we're not the only district to change boundaries. We're probably, districts all around the state, all around the country change boundaries. We've done it before here in Dearborn. We'll probably do it again eventually sometime. Hopefully it's long when I'm retired and I have to do this again. But anyway, boundaries change for all kinds of reasons. Enrollment increases. We add buildings to the district. Changing demographics, as I mentioned. These are all reasons why sometimes we have to go through these boundary changes. We did it back in 1988. That's when the students from Salina moved from going from Fortson over to Edsel Ford. And I want to tell you, at our meeting at Salina just before the break, we heard from the Salina family, and you know what, families, and you know what, they like going to Edsel Ford. They expressed an interest to continue to go to Edsel Ford. They're proud to go to Edsel Ford. And in 2004, we had a $150 million bond proposal. We actually added on to all of 3 high schools at that time. We built the Berry Career Center. We built McCullough Eunice, a K-8 building. We built Gear Park. We built a new elementary school at Salina and added on to Salina Intermediate. And at that time, we had to change boundaries, and we changed elementary and middle school or boundaries at that time. Then in 2015, that was the part of the 2013 bond, we added an addition onto River Oaks. And the students back in 2004 who got shifted out of their neighborhood school, out of River Oaks, and went to Hagen-Limburg, were promised by the Board of Education that when the time came, when the money was there, when we were able to, we would bring those students back to River Oaks. And when we built the addition onto River Oaks, we were able to do that and bring those students back. And now here we are, 2018. We are, again, at that discussion point, discussing the boundaries at the high school level. This is a discussion. This is your opportunity to provide that feedback to us. It's kind of the timeline when this all started. So the discussions really started back in May, back in the spring of this year at the board meetings. They've been on every board agenda since. In August, there was a 2.5 hour, 3-hour board study session where the board dedicated their entire meeting to just discussing this issue. A lot of data was presented on enrollment trends and populations, on transportation, on cost, on additions. All those types of things were presented to the Board of Education. And now here we are in October through December at these community forums. As was mentioned, we're here to gather feedback, to listen to what you have to say, and take that information back to the board so they can add that to all of that other information they have as they go forward in trying to make an informed, well-thought-out decision about where to go with these boundaries. So where do we get our enrollment information from? Well, it comes from several places. We do our own internal data. We've done that for the history of this district. We also contract out with an outside firm, Stanfred. They are the company that most school districts use in developing enrollment projections. And then the state of Michigan also has, well, there's 4 companies total that the state of Michigan allows you to use when doing enrollment projections. For this particular discussion, the board authorized us to go out and hire 3 of the 4 companies. We hired Stanford, Middle Cities, and Plant Moran. So that way we could look at the numbers, the enrollment numbers, look at their projections, because projecting enrollment is not an exact science. There are so many things that can change those numbers throughout the years. In fact, that's why the state, if you're going to have a bond issue, put something on the ballot and tell people that we need money to build something, the state only allows you to use 5 years out of enrollment projections because they feel that anything past that is somewhat inaccurate. But these companies were brought in. We hired these companies. They brought in to develop some projections. They look at birth rates in the area. They look at trends in the area, such as the new development of Ford Motor, bringing a whole new campus to the West Dearborn area there, and looking to increase their employee count in Dearborn from 12,000 to 24,000. So there's huge influx there. So that's something that's considered by these companies as well. And so when they put these numbers together and gave these projections, these were done back in the summer, and presented to the board at that August meeting. And right now, so the 21,000 number that we came up with, the 21,060 by Plant Moran, even the 19,694, those are all very much within the ballpark of where we are right now, because we are, like I said, just at about 21,000 students. So those are some projections, and then in reality we can kind of check them with where we're at. And so we feel pretty confident about these projections that were provided to us. So looking at the high school capacities and where we are with that, and looking at the maximum number of students, that the ideal number there, the maximum number at each of the high schools, where our enrollment is right now, and then where our projected enrollment is for next year. You can see that there's some real concerns there about the higher numbers at Dearborn High and Fortson, especially reaching 3,000 at Fortson, but also you'd see that the 1,600 number at Etzel Ford is also a concern, because it's not really, you really don't have balanced programs when you have half the number of students at one high school as opposed to the other high school. So even that low number is part of the reasons and part of this discussion on boundaries. So looking at those numbers, you kind of ask, well, then how does the school function if they're over capacity, if they have more kids in the school than they can handle? One of the ways that our schools address this issue is we also have a 4th building. It's called the Berry Career Center, and that building is at the Dearborn Heights campus, which is part of the Dearborn Public Schools. Dearborn Heights, that section of Dearborn Heights, has been part of our district since the 1970s. And will remain that part. We have River Oaks Elementary School there, and we have the Berry Center there. We have the Heights campus there. Number of programs are there. Our Howe Montessori program, special ed, adult and community ed. Also our DCMST. And then the Berry Center, which houses all of these half-day programs. Those have a real impact on the actual number of students in our schools, because those are half-day programs. So those students are out of the building for a half day. So about 700 students per day are there, 350 in the morning, 350 in the afternoon. And so this kind of gives a more realistic impact those numbers have on the enrollment in those buildings. And that's how our schools are able to manage with the numbers they have. Now there's also dual enrollment, there's the Collegiate Academy, there's co-op as well. All of those programs also take kids out of the school, so you don't actually have those students physically in the building. And all of that opens up space within the building to allow the schools to function and allow the schools to provide instruction. So we're taking a look at our current boundaries right now. You can see Dearborn High, all of Bryant goes there, all of Salina to Etzel Ford, all of Laurie to Fortson. Majority of Smith, obviously, goes to Etzel Ford. Woodworth, about 95% go to Fortson. And then over at Eunice, about 40 kids go to Dearborn High. About half the kids at Stout go over to Dearborn High, or split between Stout and Etzel Ford. So we're going to take a look at the proposals, and we know by some of our meetings at some of the other schools, especially our meetings at Etzel Ford, we understand that some of these proposals are more popular than others with certain members of the community throughout the city. So we understand that, but that's good, that's understandable. And that's the kind of feedback that we want when we're out here, and that's why we're out here presenting that, to get your feedback and understand that. So the first proposal that we look at here, Brian, Salina, and Lori remain at Dearborn, Etzel, and Fortson. The big split here, obviously, is the Smith students, that they will go to Dearborn High. And so that's obviously the big change in this proposal. There's also some change in Woodworth, where the students who are going to Dearborn High are moving to Etzel Ford. And the STEM students are the students that are involved in our middle school STEM program over at the Dearborn Heights campus. Those students, 15 of them come from the Dearborn High attendance area, about 10 from Etzel Ford, 30 from Fortson. They'll continue to go to the high school of the attendance area that they live in. So that pretty much stays consistent throughout. Also, what do these numbers represent here? So 270 at Bryant, that's how many students each year move from Bryant to Dearborn High. So over a 4-year period, you see about 1080. So that's the difference in these numbers, and that's what we're kind of representing here, is how those numbers would impact over a 4-year period. And then these are the maps. This is the map, and obviously you can see the big change is that dark gray area down in the corner, which is the Etzel Ford attendance area, and that changes to orange. That changes to the Dearborn High attendance area. There's also a section, section up on the north, kind of to the east there. Currently, those students attend Dearborn High in orange, and that would change. There'd be a chunk of those students would go to Etzel Ford, and then a small that little triangular piece up there, those students would go to Fortson. And this is just a little bit closer view of that map of that area that I was talking about. So this is Tireman way up on the north. The diagonal that runs through there are some railroad tracks, and then there's Greenfield on the east. And that would move those Dearborn High kids, as I mentioned, to Etzel Ford and to Fortson. And then there's a section in the middle that also would move from Fortson and Dearborn High to Etzel Ford. So that's Michigan Avenue on the south part of that, on the bottom. And then you have Southfield Freeway on the east side, and Greenfield on the west, and Paul up at the top. So that's proposal one. We've got a couple more to go through, and at this point in time, we all know that you're getting tired of hearing my voice. So this is the part where I turn it over to Hassan and let him explain the next couple of proposals.
Thank you, David. Moving along, when it comes to the 3 middle schools, Bryant, Salina, and Lori, there are no changes, as you can see on the chart in front of you. Stout, the 125 kids that normally go to Stout, and then from Stout they go to Dearborn High. These are the Maples elementary students who attend Stout Middle School. And in 2004, these students used to come to O.L. Smith. So part of the changes of the middle school boundaries, the Stout kids were shifted from Smith to Stout, the Maple students. So this would be the numbers for Bryant Middle School over here. Heading to Etzel Ford, Salina students will remain at Etzel. I'm sorry. I'm using the pointer over here so that you can follow me a little bit rather than being abstract. This change here, the 145 students from Stout, there's a small change that will affect some of the students that normally go to Stout and then go to Etzel Ford. As far as Smith Middle School, what we are saying now, this will impact your building. The entire Smith community now will attend Etzel Ford High School. As you know, currently, we have about 50 students from River Oaks Elementary that come to Smith every year. And then we have a small contingency from Park, Nona, and Beach streets that attend O.L. Smith and then continue on to Dearborn High. So this will be a change for the Smith community. Woodworth Middle School, 50 students will attend Edsel Ford now, and will give Edsel a good cushion number of 2060. On the third tier over here, Lori, no changes. Stout will attend, 20 students from Stout will attend Fortson. Eunice, no change. Woodworth will lose the 50 kids every year, and then we'll give Fortson this cushion over here. Now, these changes, as mentioned, will impact Smith, Park, Nona, and Beach Streets, and River Oak students now will attend Edsel Ford rather than Dearborn High. And some of the Stout students will attend Fortson. Middle schools that will be split, it'll be Stout and Eunice. And transportation, it'll be an increase of 2 buses, totaling 102 bus routes, I should say, totaling an increased expenditure of $108,000 on the district. Now, one thing we need to mention that in all 3 proposals, we have reached a point where there has to be some construction, some renovations at Dearborn High and Edsel Ford, because these 2 buildings, Edsel can maintain what they have if we don't transfer students to Edsel, but if I'm a betting man, there has to be some movement to move some students to Edsel to bring up the enrollment at Edsel. But again, I'm not the one who's making the decisions, it's the board members, and the board members need your input regarding these future assumptions. Currently at Dearborn High, we have over 12 to 15 teachers, maybe the number is more, who are on a cart. Every day, they don't have their own classrooms, they move from one class to another. That impacts the quality of education given at that building. Again, you can see some of the transfer in colors over here. Used to be orange, but now it's gray. These are the River Oak students that will be attending Edsel Ford, and over here, these are the Woodworth students that will be attending Edsel Ford. As far as the boundaries are concerned, again, just a bigger map, no changes. River Oak students, Joy Road over here, Telegraph, and then you have Warren, and then this is Hazelton. Again, this is a proposal, and these are the 50 Woodworth students. Starts from, I want to say, over here, Paul Street. It's a little bit higher than Ford Road, and then you go down Mercury Drive, Michigan Avenue, and then back to Greenfield. Proposal number 3 entails the following. Again, no changes for the 3 middle schools, Bryant, Salina, and Lori. They will continue with the same places they attend. This is a change, and it's similar to Proposal 1. Just a suggestion. All of Smith, according to Proposal number 3, will be attending Dearborn High. Edsel Ford now will receive a bigger number of students from Woodworth Middle School. That number grew from 50 per year to 190 per year, totaling 760 over 4 years. And the 145 students that from Stout will still come to Edsel Ford. And now if we move to Fortson, now Fortson will receive all of the Eunice students. Normally, every year, Fortson receives Eunice middle schoolers minus 40 kids or 45 kids that go to Dearborn High. But now, according to this proposal, all of Eunice will attend Fortson. And the remaining numbers will attend, from Woodworth will attend Fortson. And now this is also a change, according to proposal number 3. the 125 students from Stout Middle School. Again, these are the Maples Elementary students. Instead of going to Dearborn High, now we'll go to Fortson. You can see the changes of the colors. This is Dearborn High, but now Maple students and Eunice some of the Eunice students that normally go Dearborn High now will attend Fortson. It's yellow. And Fortson and Dearborn High to Edsel Ford. This is a bigger chunk of transferring students from Paul Avenue, living Paul Avenue, down Southfield, Michigan Avenue, and then coming to Greenfield and getting this bigger chunk of land as far as the attendance area is concerned. From Dearborn High to Fortson, I think I mentioned that earlier on the smaller map. And as you can see, when the board gave us the okay to share these proposals with our community, again, no proposal will have no impact on students and parents. Every single proposal, and potentially any changes in these proposals, will have an impact on some members of our community. So we totally understand the emotional issue involved. We understand what's at stake, and let me assure you, all of the board members and our superintendent understand fully what would that entail. But if I can share from my own personal experience, this is my third round being involved with boundary changes in our district. And every time we go through a cycle of changes, change is hard and it's painful. But at the end of the day, we have a moral responsibility to provide the best service for all of our students. So thank you for being part of this process tonight. We still have 2 more presentations, as mentioned by David. Eunice Middle School tomorrow and Bryant Middle School. So if you would like to join us, you're more than welcome. Everything we present to you, everything we receive as far as ideas or input, we are gathering all this information. It'll be presented to the board, but also through our blog, iBlog, Dearborn Public Schools, and you have it in your handouts. I hope each and every one picked up a handout on the way in. If you visit the iBlog, you'll see both presentations, and also there's a place for commentary, a place for taking an inventory, which proposal would be more suited for you, something that you would love to see happening, or suggestion box as well to give us your input as far as a possible another proposal. What are the next steps that we are encompassing? Again, as mentioned earlier, this is a crucial element of the whole process. Your input, your participation, your questions, and your suggestions. And the board will discuss all the mitigating factors related to this topic at its future board meetings. I would remiss, honestly, if I don't mention to you that we are very grateful that Ms. Zaina Jibril, and I hope Zaina's still here, please stand up. Zaina is your new principal, and she's been doing an outstanding job, and we're very proud of her in Dearborn Public Schools. Thank you, Zaina. And also, I saw a few board members. I'll have David, because my sight is not that good. I'm an old man. I see Mr. Thorpe over there. Are there any board members in the back that I don't see? Oh, Board President, Ms. Mary Lane, all the way in the back. Thank you for coming. And of course, we have our superintendent, Dr. Mileko, who will address our assembly later on in our presentation. So at this point, this is your time to tell us what's on your mind. This is your time to ask your questions. This is your time to share with us your input, which is crucial to this process. And we will be taking notes diligently and making sure that your comments and questions and input will be heard by the board. Any questions? Please come on down, and We want to make sure that everybody hears you.
I just have a quick question. You state in proposal 1 that the buses are going to go 4 to Dearborn High and 20 to Etzel.
Yes.
And in proposal 3, you say they're going to go 4 Dearborn High, 21 to Etzel, but you don't state what the numbers are in proposal 2. Can someone please tell me what the bus?
What we said,
All you said
yeah,
is that it's going to increase by 2.
by 2 routes
Increase by 2.
to Etzel Ford.
So Etzel will be what?
Currently, whatever Etzel has, and I believe we have 10 or 11 buses at Etzel, minus the special ed buses. We're not counting the special ed buses. Yeah, so it'll be 2 extra routes to Etzel Ford.
Dearborn High will be 14 and Etzel will have 12 in proposal 2. So it's more of an even split. It'll be
10 and 16.
So Dearborn High will go down to 10 and Etzel will go up to 16, is what you're saying?
Yes. Thank you.
Sarah Burmack,
Hello, Sarah.
Fifth Forum.
Yes.
This is an amazing time for me. I love doing this. I think I'm retiring after this one, so you guys get excited not seeing the Gerlachs. The boundary changes are going to affect my 3 daughters. Potentially it's going to affect who their classmates are going to be, who their teammates are going to be. And I know that the proposals that are up there, they greatly affect who will go to Etzel. And it's greatly going to affect the O.L. Smith community and the Etzel Ford community. Really, the only option you're giving Etzel parents and O.L. Smith parents is proposal 2. That's the only option you're really giving us. And I know we're holding these forums to solve these boundary overcrowding issues that we're having at the high schools. And can we go to proposal 3?
Absolutely.
I know there's a lot of people here, or from Smith, that they want to stay at Etzel Ford. If you take Woodward, maybe it's an easy, even swap. Woodward to Dearborn High, 760. Leave Smith where they want to be. They want to be at Etzel, so that's a quick, easy flip, because right now you're only giving Smith proposal 2. If you make that easy numbers, that'll keep us at Etzel. Another reason people chose to live in this community, I know my husband and I just bought a house and we were looking all over, and we chose to go to Etzel Ford. And we chose to go to Etzel Ford because we like the community that we live in. We want to be around our community members. So I also came up with proposal 4, which I made a bunch of copies for everybody. Thank you. Proposal 4, I really focused on community. I focused on community because Stout is less than a mile, that's a Ford location. Smith is within 2 miles of Etzel Ford location. It's community. Community is important to everybody around here. So I want to keep all of Stout, and I want to keep all of O.L. Smith at Etzel Ford because I want to keep the community strong. I want to keep us together. I also want to keep the busing even. And when you look at the other proposals, it's not even, it's not fair, it's bombarding Etzel Ford with buses. And no one in here should ever think that that is fair, to make one school the commuter school, one school the busing school. I know my husband said at the board meeting, just because we have a parking lot does not make it fair to make us a commuter school, just because we have a nice, huge parking lot. Another reason that I think Stout and Smith should go is right now Stout is currently split between 3 high schools. Frankly, that's not fair. It's not fair for the students. And my biggest reason why Stout and Smith should stay together is they have the biggest participation in after-school sports at Etzel Ford. My daughter's an athlete. She has friends who are athletes. They have siblings who are athletes. So I asked you to look into feeder schools. And what are these middle schools and what are their participation? Because that affects your community. 70% of the female athletes in the fall sports come from Smith. 28% come from Stout. Well, I think it would be higher if we kept them all together, because right now they're split between schools. 2% of female athletes come from Salina or other move-in private schools, 2%. Male athletes, 45% come from Smith, and 42% come from Stout, 13% come from Salina or move-ins or private schools. Let me just break that down for you. Total Edsel athletes altogether, 54% are from this school alone at Edsel, 37% are from Stout, and 8% are from Salina or other schools. That really puts 91% of the activity participation after school all comes from Stout and Smith. Why is participation such an important thing? Because it instills not just a sense of pride in your school, it instills a sense of pride in the community that you live in, the community of Dearborn. I want the board and the administration to make their decision on these boundary changes based on community location. I want you to look at busing, make it even, make it fair, and I want you to look at the feeder schools and their participation. Keep Smith, keep all the Stout at Edsel Ford, keep them in their community.
Thank you, Sarah.
My name is Mark Gerlach.
How are you going to top that, Mark?
I didn't show her all my notes.
Okay.
All right. I've attended every forum, so I'm up on two on Sarah. I've been able to gather a lot of information. Some of the stuff that I've heard when I've attended the schools on the East End was kind of enlightening. I initially didn't understand the need for a fourth school or the want for a 9th grade academy. It actually makes sense on what they're feeling, but it's also important that we share what we feel in our community. So the first forum that, well, Edsel was the first forum I actually addressed, and I had a couple questions that I never got good feedback from the district, but by attending the forums, I gathered my own information. So the first question I had was, what has the district learned about the impact of student participation in extracurricular activities where there is a high number of Boston students? District did not have information. Woodworth parents had information. Woodworth parents did not like that there was not participation, or that there was not busing and transportation provided to students who went to Bryant but lived over on the East End. In fact, they complained that many of those students didn't participate because of the lack of transportation. So that seems to me that that's an important piece that the board needs to figure out. So the next question I had is, could the actual number of extracurricular activities be decreased if Edsel becomes a commuter school, if 1 or 3 are adopted? So again, when I asked the district about this, the stance was it's hypothetical. We're not going to look into that. What are the possibilities? Because we don't know those numbers. Again, we do. We have those numbers. The ADs put together a list of participation from last year. So here's the trend at Edsel. I know Sarah shared with you the fall. We can look back to the entire year from last year. 547 athletes across all sports. O.L. Smith comprised 54% of that, 297. Stout comprised 34% of that, 186 participants. Salina was 12%. Salina other at 64 participants year-round. Female athletics were 251 participants. O.L. Smith was 65%. Stout was 31. Salina and others were 4. Male athletics, 296. Stout was 45. Smith was 45. Stout 37. Salina 18. So there is a severe risk of losing activities after school. Girl basketball, 67% of players come from Smith. You remove 67% of participants in the program, that's easy math. What's going to happen? Soccer, 54%. Volleyball, 67%. Golf, 91%. The numbers are astounding for females. Boys have issues as well. Football, 48% is from Smith. Golf is 90%. Baseball, 64%. There are astounding numbers that show trends on what will happen if you turn Edsel into a commuter school. Couple the numbers that we know with the fact that parents from Woodworth can attest their kids don't participate because of busing. Just by simply replacing kids isn't going to solve the problem. So, Salina. Salina wants to be at Edsel. The district was very sympathetic to the fact Salina wants to be at Edsel. Where is the equity? Where is the sympathy when you have 190 kids from here that are going to be moved? There is none from the district. Two of their proposals remove Smith from Edsel. But yet, one's community suggestion raises a bunch of concern and sympathy for Salina. Look, I understand Salina wanting to be at Edsel. I absolutely understand it. The district needs to understand there's other families that feel the same way. So, if the district insists on eventually making Edsel a commuter school, they have a responsibility to ensure our students have access to every single extracurricular activity the students at Dearborn and Fordson have. I live on a debt, a block and a half from the walkway on Hip that feeds right into the property. Based on 1 and 3, this is the lunacy behind 1 and 3. The family that lives on the corner of Hip and Audette, closer to Edsel Ford than my family. According to 1 and 3, they go to Dearborn. Their lot line is literally 20 yards or less from Edsel, and they will go to Dearborn. So preference, proposal 3 with that one adjustment. Keep Smith, and you can move those 190 to Woodworth to Dearborn. Makes no sense to offset 380 students when you can cut that number in half. Proposal 2 makes sense with one minor adjustment. Keep those Woodworth kids together. Keep them together and keep them at Fordson. Otherwise, proposal 2 makes sense. Proposal 4 makes sense to me. But if the district decides to go in another direction, just keep in mind all the feedback that you're getting. Focus should be on keeping our sense of community within the schools while making decisions that are the least divisive. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
How's it going? My name's Mike McPherson. This is my 3rd forum. I am a Duval Penguin, O.L. Smith Viking, Edsel Ford Thunderbird, and a Dearborn resident and taxpayer, as well as a teacher and coach at Edsel Ford. Okay, if we got to stick with the proposal 2, 100%, okay? I'm a big believer in community schools. See it in the classroom. I assign group work. How do I expect a group of students, maybe from O.L. Smith, who's 2 miles away from Edsel Ford, and a Salina Wildcat, who's 6.2 miles away from Edsel Ford, how do they get together and work in groups? They don't. It doesn't get done. We need to go back to community schools. It needs to be you go to school where you live. You grow up with kids. You go to school together. You build those friendships that last a lifetime. Not we pick them apart and rip them, send one kid to the east side, one kid to the west side. What I mean for proposal, I'm proposing proposal 4, send Ola Smith, Ola Stout to Edsel Ford. Again, Salina is 6.2 miles away from Edsel Ford, while being 2.8 miles away from Fordson High School. Send Woodworth, Lori, and Salina to Fordson. Give Bryant and I believe McCullough Eunice to Dearborn High. I believe that's a decent balance. Fordson being the bigger school gets 3 middle schools. Dearborn and Edsel Ford being similar in size, each get 2 feeder schools that will be all theirs. That's it.
Check, 1, 2. Check, check. Well, hello, my name's Regan Ford, taxpayer here in Dearborn. I got a 8th grader here at Smith and a 5th grader over at Whitmore Bowles. I'm late to the process, so I just have a few questions, to be honest with you. Which schools are overcrowded? Is it Fordson and Dearborn? Is it Edsel?
Fordson and Dearborn.
Fordson and Dearborn. So Edsel Ford isn't overcrowded. So the conversation in my mind should be, how can we bring in some people to that school? Where did the conversation go to all of a sudden taking kids at a school that's not overcrowded and busing them someplace else? It's not our school that's overcrowded. Why? I mean, we're reasonable people. I mean, we gotta make ends meet. We gotta bring a few kids in, bus them in. That's the deal. That's what we gotta do. But why take the one school that's not overcrowded and start shifting the kids all around? We'll welcome some new kids in, and our kids can stay here too. I mean, I know it's common sense, but it's not. It's not a big technical term. And just a quickie here, for my first time. Under every proposal, it says no boundary change, no boundary change. What does that mean? I mean, clearly we're...
If we don't do anything next year, these would be the numbers at each prospective high school.
Oh, okay.
18, 19.
All right, that threw me off.
Yeah, that's okay.
All right. So, Fordson is overcrowded and Dearborn's overcrowded. And we've already X'd off the possibilities of building classrooms in their prospective schools, right? That's been cut. No one wants to do that.
I think there have been several conversations in the board study sessions to put additions to Dearborn High, but still that would not solve the problem long term. All the projections we have is that we're going to experience population growth in our student body over the next 5 years at least. These what the figures are showing. So we have no other way, and I appreciate your point. Why is our community school Edsel Ford underutilized? We're fine. Our numbers are fine. Why are you messing with our numbers? And that's a legitimate question. But the bottom line, collectively, as a Dearborn community, we have a moral responsibility to resolve issues at every single school. When it comes my kid and your kid and her kid and his kid, that's could be very dangerous approach to what...
We're willing to welcome other kids into our school. We just don't want to ship them out if they don't have to.
Absolutely.
We're willing to work with all the other schools in the community.
Absolutely.
Come on in.
What I understood you say, you're in favor of keeping the Smith kids together?
Yes.
At Edsel Ford?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Yes. And then lastly, just personally, I went to the same school. I won't be long, just a minute here. I went to the same school from the time I was in kindergarten till 8th grade. And I had buddies, and I was a 3-sport athlete, and I was cool, man. I was in the cool club, right? Loved it, little country town. My parents moved me I was going to start 9th grade at a new high school in a new district where I didn't know a soul. And I can attest to the fact that that's a terrible thing to do to a child at that time in his life. It was terrible. You know how kids are. You get bullied, Sports aren't as fun as anymore because none of your friends are on the teams. It's if you could pick a time in a child's life, the worst possible time to do this for a child is a preteen or a young teen getting ready to move into the 8th, the 9th, and the 10th grade. That's do it in elementary school. Do it some other time. It's terrible. And I just ask that no matter which program you go with, you all know which one we want, but that there has to be, or we suffer the consequences or possibilities of some very upset families, that there's some sort of grandfather clause for these kids who have come up through this school and who are right now at Edsel Ford High School as middle schoolers, working out and pumping iron with their buddies so that they can work, and they're getting coached by the same coaches that they would in the Etzel Ford program. I think we need to grandfather, I don't know how long it is, that's up to negotiation or to the board, but you just can't take an 8th grade kid who thinks all his life he's going to Etzel Ford and get a thing in the mail, you go to a new school. That will damage families, it'll damage children, it's unsafe, and it's reckless.
Thank you, Mr. Ford. Go ahead.
Good evening, Jeff Hassel, Second Forum. You've said during Proposal 1 and 3 you're going to be doing additions at Etzel and Dearborn. What is the estimated approximate cost right now of each addition?
I think the board, and we have figures, but it's not part of the initial presentation, but as far as Dearborn High and Etzel Ford, we did a preliminary study, and again, when we share these numbers with the community, we can't be definitive 100% because these numbers change with the cost of living.
Because at Etzel meeting, you didn't have any on these. That's
No, we do. No, we do. We do have the numbers, and David will pull them up momentarily. If you bear with me a second, please. These are some of the figures that were shared with the board, and again, everything we do has to be very transparent, and we pride ourselves in being transparent with our community. Addition of 4 classrooms. These are initial cost estimates. Again, cost estimates around $3 million at Dearborn High. Etzel Ford, it depends how many students will be added to Etzel Ford. So you're talking whether adding only 8 classrooms or a new field house, bordering on the cost of $41.8 million, and I can tell you this much, the district doesn't have this money, $41 million, to do these major renovations at Etzel Ford High School. So again, this is a process. These are initial figures that the business department, put together. And again, anytime we initiate any type of major renovation or building processes, we subcontract companies, architectural companies that will do all of these more precise cost estimates for us. Again, there are conversations about adding classrooms to Michael Berry Center and see if we can eliminate some of the overcrowding at both Dearborn High and Fordson High School. So I hope these figures, will answer some of your questions and concerns, and these are legitimate concerns and questions, and we appreciate you asking them. But at the end of the day, I said at the beginning of this presentations, we as a community, and specifically the Board of Education who is representing this community, will have very difficult choices or very difficult decisions to make at the end of the day. This is my 3rd round in boundary changes. I lived it in the late 80s. I lived it in 2004 when I was principal here at O.L. Smith, and now I'm living it again. I support every single thing that's been said about parents feeling dislodged or kids feeling left out. But the fact of the matter is, a decision has to be made. Now, what type of decision, what type of process, what type of final plan, I really don't know. And nobody knows, including board members at this stage. That's why it behooves us to listen to you. Proposal 4, I assure you, the board has seen that proposal more than once, and they're studying it. Also, suggestions about building a new high school. This has come over and over and over, during the discussions. The board has heard it, whether this is feasible or not. Again, there will be study sessions and presentations to the community about the cost and what that entails. So at the end of the day, there's a difficult decision that will be made, and we hope collectively that whatever decision is made will be best for all of Dearborn Public School students.
Okay. Now with these cost figures here, and you're saying within the next 5 years, Ford Motor Company, as we all know it, is doing a massive thing.
Yes.
For some off reason that all them employees that Ford's getting ready to bring into here, they all decide to
plot down roots here. How long is that or any of these proposals going to last and sustain versus the cost of biting the bullet now, fundraising, getting grants, doing whatever we have to do to get a new high school? This has been a problem since I went to Edson Ford in 99 to 2002. You guys known about it for that long. Like you said, this is your third round. Why haven't we permanently fixed it instead of just putting Band-Aids every time the pipe leaks?
We have a good problem in Dearborn schools, which is population growth, and that's a wonderful problem to have. I assure you, the surrounding districts are very envious of our district, given our increased enrollment every single year. Now, why do we have a Band-Aid solution? I don't think we ever considered putting a Band-Aid solution. I mean, you have to be fiscally responsible. If you expand too much and then you don't have the clients or the students to fulfill that expansion, the community will be mad. How come you didn't have the foresight to predict that we're going to have a dip in enrollment? Nobody knows these things. That's why we have to be very careful in our assumptions and very careful in presenting the best service for all students. And when it comes to money, I mean, we've shared figures during our presentations about the cost of the high school. It's huge, and it's going to entails a bond election, and it's going to be a process. Now, is the board willing to go through that process? You know, I think they're hearing from all different segments of society, and your point, and I assure you, your point is not new to them. So they've heard that before, and they are considering options. But at the end of the day, they have to be fiscally responsible so that whatever decision they make does not overload the district with more debt.
Now, has the board even gone to St. Alphonsus yet and asked roughly how much money they would want to buy the high school?
St. Alphonse, I think this is not a new discussion, and I'm glad you brought. Yeah, and I'm glad you brought it up. It's a building that needs rehabilitation.
Well, of course it is. It's an old building.
It is, and all options are on the table now. During their study sessions, I'm sure they've gone over the figures. I cannot speak on behalf of the board, okay? But as far as renovating that place, it's going to take some money, and whether it would be feasible to provide our students with the same programs in that place, I really don't know. But I assure you, that was part of their discussions.
Because, like, you know, it's, what, maybe a couple blocks apart from each other. You can take 9th grade, half of 10th grade, put it in that building there, and then that alleviate a lot of room at Fortson.
Yeah, I wish it's that easy, because when it comes to renovating building, as you know from your own home, it's easier sometimes to build a house to renovate than to renovate an entire house.
It's easier just to go boom and start from fresh.
Yeah, knock it down. Yes, you're right. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Vicki Pung. My son goes here to O.L. Smith. I have a question about funding for the additions that might happen at
the high schools?
Sorry.
Okay.
I heard from previous people that attended previous sessions that the district was looking into using extra funds that they already have, and also the Wayne County millage funding that happened last election.
Mm-hmm.
My concern about using the Wayne County funding is that that's the only kind of funding that the district is allowed to use to pay for extra staffing. The district can issue a bond to pay for more classrooms, but we can't issue a bond to pay for more staffing. And I think what we need to consider is the fact that lower class sizes and more teachers in the classrooms is maybe more important than spending that money on buildings.
Thank you. But at the end of the day, we need the space to put these teachers in, correct? So more teachers means more classrooms.
Buildings at other classrooms. I mean, at schools, though. That's my point.
Empty schools? Empty classrooms?
Classrooms at schools.
Okay. Thank you so much. Yes, good point. Hi, Marty.
Good evening, Mr. Jafer. Hi, everybody. Some of you know me. I'm Marty McAuliffe, the Athletic Boosters President at Edsel Ford. I did speak at Edsel for the presentation there, and a couple of people tonight spoke on athletes. Athletes is a big part of what I do at Edsel Ford. I present I represent our parents that are boosters members represent our athletes. You heard the numbers on where our athletes come from. Okay, well, I'll talk about the parental participation. If we lose those numbers of athletes because you want to bus them away from here, I guarantee you we're going to lose the parental participation. Right now, it's tough for me and our boosters board to get volunteers to help work concessions, fundraisers, and what have you, to raise money to help pay for whatever our athletic director asks us to him with, because the district can't help us pay for equipment or uniforms or whatever we want to spend on our athletes. So I guarantee you those numbers are going to decrease even more than where we are at now. Parental participation is based on the community. It's based on where we moved, where we live. If our kids move, they're not going to like it. And I'm going to key in on that. I'm a product of Detroit Public Schools. I grew up in Detroit in the 70s. I was bused to elementary school, bused to middle schools, and I hated it. Once I was done with 8th grade and it was time to go to high school, my parents said no. You know what they did? They sent me to a private school. Where? St. Alphonsus. For 3 years I went to St. Alphonsus. I had to take another bus, but I liked it there because I was tired of being bused on a yellow bus to a public school. How would you like to be standing on a corner at a blistery winter morning waiting for the bus? Nothing worse than waiting for your bus in the middle of the winter. God, I hated it. So I went to high school at St. Alice for 3 years. My parents wanted to move from Detroit, move to Canton. I had to finish senior year at Canton High School. That was terrible. Tore me up. Tore me up. I didn't get to finish at St. Alice with my friends from the community that I went to school with for 8 years because they didn't want to go to Detroit Public Schools and get bused. So I guarantee you, you're not thinking about the kids that don't want to be bused. And our parental participation will decrease. So think about the kids and the parents that we're going to lose to help us volunteer to raise money for our athletes. Thank you.
And Marty, trust me, your work and the Athletic Booster Club work at Edsel Ford is very much appreciated because you don't only service the needs of certain kids, you service the needs of all kids.
This is my second forum. My name's Steve Durant. I have 4 kids in Dearborn Public Schools, and I'm a high school educator in Wyandotte. So I could easily pull all 4 of my kids out of Dearborn, go to Wyandotte, and be further away, 8.2 miles away from all their friends. So we're hearing all these numbers, okay? I chose this community because I love Dearborn. My son's in 11th grade, he goes to Edsel Ford. I have a daughter in 9th grade. Now comes the $1 million question. When I have a kid here who's in 7th grade right now, and I currently have a kid at Nowen, when it's time for my son Jack to go to the high school, according to proposals 1 and 3, one of my children who won't drive, I have to drive them to Edsel, turn around and take my other child to Dearborn High. How does that make sense? I live close to it. I like Dearborn because it's downhill if he rode his bike. But what I don't like about it is if you pull the map up, you blow up the community that is known of Smith, of Stout, of Edsel Ford. So the superintendent's been around for a while. You have the board. You walk all over the schools. In my school, you talk about legacy. You've been through it 3 times. You've laid your legacy. But what about the future legacy? Making a bad choice to, like you said, to put a Band-Aid on a flesh wound doesn't make any sense. 0. You should think about what is best. You said Salina really loves Edsel. I know why, because I have a kid that goes there. 3-4 years ago, they were on the naughty list. In other words, they were a high priority school. They're not. You have not considered the 14 teachers that take a cart to an empty classroom at Dearborn, and you say, well, that's not good, but let's send more kids there and capacitize all 3 schools. That makes no sense. I'm all for proposal 2 because 1, it's easier to make 1 drop for all 3 kids if I want to. Secondly, I have three boys all playing football. 2 of them want to be like their big brother and play for Edsel Ford, have Coach Mack as their coach, because that's what Coach Mack does, is inspire. That blows it all up. I'm done.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you. Go ahead.
My name's Jason Skidmore. I'm kind of an interloper here. I grew up in Allen Park, went to Cabrini, but my wife is a lifelong Dearbornite. Graduated from Dearborn High in '91. We bought a house in the Snow Stout Edsel line. But when our daughter started, we have two. One's 3, the other's 10. When we started the one in kindergarten, we found, apart from a couple of phenomenal parents, and I saw Mike in there somewhere, we found the leadership and the sense of community somewhat lacking. Anne has several friends that have kids in Duval, and we checked it out. We met with Dan Hartley, who was principal then, loved his leadership style, loved the sense of community, school of choice to our daughter there. She's in 5th grade now, and now if we drop out school of choice, she leaves all of her friends to head over to Stout instead of going to Smith and then back to Edsel. So the question is there an opportunity for her to stay in that line? And for our 3-year-old, is there an opportunity for her to follow in her sister's footsteps going to the fantastic school of Duval? A follow-up question with that is, if there's so many schools that are loving the leadership in these other schools, what is it that we're doing as a community to fix the leadership that they find so lacking in their own communities?
Regarding schools of choice, I do believe this is a process that goes for each segment, elementary, middle school, and high school, separate. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, the board, has issued its feelings about the schools of choice, and I don't think, and I don't believe, that you can reverse. For instance, if your daughter is slated to go to Stout, based on her home school, she has to go according to her home school, not according to the boundary line exemption or to these schools of choice.
Okay.
So this has been the common practice all along, nothing.
Okay.
And
what about for our family having a gap year between our youngest, who won't start kindergarten until her sister's a year out of Duval?
They have to apply again. They have to apply again. But there are no guarantee that the application will be accepted. But again, I'm assuming, don't quote me on that, but
our school of choice, Duval daughter, will have the opportunity to follow
you know what?
Into Smith.
The best way for me to answer your question is to refer you to Student Services. Mr. Mashur is the Director of Student Services, because, our job tonight is to discuss boundaries, and I'm sorry, I cannot give you the definite answer, but Student Services will be more than glad to discuss it with you or with any other situation that some of our parents might have, and we'll give you the accurate answers.
Okay.
Yeah.
On a side note, I've never seen anything like this, where so many people that grew up here feel a need to come back here to put their kids back into the same system that they grew up with because they're so passionate about the city. So, fantastic for all.
It's a good community. Yes. Thank you.
My name is Brianna Valentine. I'm an 8th grader at Stem Middle School. I had to test into my school, and we are right next to DCMST. Now I've heard about testing into DCMST, and now I'm hearing that they get invitations. I'm curious because exactly how many people are invited to DCMST? And how will that affect the borderline issue?
I think, Yusuf, you want to answer this question?
I can talk to her on the side about that. Or do you want me to
Yeah, because I want, yeah.
I
It's Dr. Musallam.
can answer that. Real quick. For DCMST, students that receive certain assessment scores on the PSAT, they do get an invitation based on their score. So all students of whom score at the base levels in the PSAT that would be recommended for DCMST would get an invitation, and then from there, it's an application process. Through the application process. So if a student scores the score sets that they need to get into DCMST, they're sent an invitation letting them know that they are eligible. They then apply, and then through that application process, decisions are made.
Right. Like when she did STEM, they chose only 60 kids. How many kids going to the 9th grade is there?
It is. It's 60 students. 60 students, they go into 9th grade, 60 students, and then you have 60 students each year, so that equates to the 240. Does that answer your question? You're very welcome.
Also,
It's okay.
STEM is a newer school. We come from multiple middle schools, and now we're together and we're bonding. We are all close to each other. And now we're going to be separated again. An idea that's been brought up is a STEM high school. This might help the border issue, and it would keep these kids together still, which would make them happy, and these could help out with these other schools.
There was this same point was brought up, and thank you so much for reminding everybody that there are different trains of thoughts out there about what would be the best solution to this overcrowding situation we have in Dearborn schools. So STEM high school or a magnet high school or specialized programs, all of these things have been discussed to address the overcrowding needs. And I definitely sympathize with you, and everybody sympathizes with you because of your friends that you are with, and then all of a sudden you have to branch out into different buildings. Very, very good point. Thank you so much, Ms. Valentine.
My name is Leslie Burnett. I have 2 daughters that have gone through the Dearborn schools. My youngest will be graduating this spring. And my husband and I bought our house in Dearborn specifically to raise our kids in this community. Neither one of us were raised in Dearborn, lived in Dearborn, but we are very happy to live in Dearborn. And with that said, I just want to remind the board that there are a lot of other community members out there that do not have children in the schools. And when you make that boundary decision, it will affect property values. So if you make a decision to make Etzel Ford a commuter school, when people have purchased their homes specifically to take their children to a high school, and all of a sudden it becomes a commuter school, it will affect whether people will purchase homes that are for sale in those communities, and it will affect the value of their homes. So let's not be remiss to forget about the people that are out there that do not have children in our schools, that are older people or that are younger people that don't have children in the schools yet. So I just wanted to remind everybody, and I of course am for either Proposal 2 or Proposal 4. So,
thank you, Ms. Burnett. Thank you.
How you doing? Paul Hutchison. Could you pull up Proposal 2 map for me real quick?
Sure.
So one of the things I want to say is I didn't grow up in Dearborn either, but we live here now. Our kids went to Dearborn schools. I still have one son at Etzel Ford, and we love it for all the reasons that were explained tonight. I'd also like to say that I concur with everything that we've been talking about tonight. But there's a few other points I wanted to bring up that someone hasn't touched on yet. One is if you look at this map for Proposal 2, and we can't flip back and forth, but if you look at Proposal 2, it is the least disruptive proposal out there. It leaves the borders 90% intact, the groupings 90% intact, except for a couple squares that are shifted to increase population at Etzel Ford. So to me, it's a no-brainer why you would shift so many things around for 1 or 3 when 2 is just a tweak, like what Mr. Reagan said. So we need more kids at Etzel. There's overpopulation at Dearborn and Fordson. That solves the problem. And look at it, it's almost identical. There's just a couple squares. everybody that's in the schools they're in now would stay in the schools except for a small impact of people. The second thing I want to say is if you look at the maps, I printed mine out to bring with me, but go back and take a look. I'm going to say what maybe somebody wouldn't say. One of the reasons we love this area is because of the multiculturalism of this community. When my kids were younger, they went to Saline schools, which are considered top schools in the state. When we moved to Dearborn and the kids started going to Dearborn schools, they absolutely loved the multicultural environment that Dearborn provided for them. They absolutely embraced it, they made closer friends, they got more involved in extracurricular activities, and that's an important part of our community. Proposal 1 and Proposal 3, if you look at them, split the school districts east and west, almost straight down the line. Proposal 2 keeps a spread between east and west for our communities and our schools to stay multicultural, and I think that's an important piece that we all need to acknowledge. We just had a big election in Dearborn, and that was a big piece of it, right? We're all Dearborn, and we're trying to avoid the east-west battle, and those other two proposals go further to entrench that division between our two communities. The other thing I want to say is if you look at the numbers, the Plant Moran and the other statistics demonstrate that there's no foreseeable decline in the population of students going to our schools, right? So we talked about overstructuring and overbuilding and building buildings that won't be used, but for the foreseeable future, the numbers are going up, 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 up. So no matter how you slice it, we have to build somewhere. And so whether it's a new high school or it's additions to Edsel and Dearborn High School, we can't be lied to or put our heads in the sand that that's not something that has to happen. It's going to happen. So we can talk about fiscal responsibility, which I appreciate, but we also have to base our decisions on the reality that we're going to have to expand. Proposal 2 brings more students to Edsel Ford, where the proposed building sites are already on the table anyway, right? There's already discussion about adding some classrooms, converting the gym into some classrooms, maybe building a new pool. That's going to have to happen anyway. Somewhere down the line, some of the schools are going to have to be expanded. Proposal 2 brings the most amount of kids back to Edsel, they have the most space to expand and grow, and building has to be done anyway. So it's the most sensible long-term solution of the 3 proposals. Lastly, I'd like to say that all of my kids that are in Edsel or went to Edsel participated in band, choir, orchestra, drama, crew, football, golf, and various other activities. And the low population that we have at that school right now is killing some of those programs. Some of our teachers that were dedicated to those extracurricular activities can't even work there full time anymore because we don't have the student base. So Proposal 2 again, or 4, which is now my new favorite proposal, accomplishes the same thing of bringing more students, because Edsel's underutilized right now. When we went to the football game at Dearborn, you can't even move over there. There's no room for that place to grow. Bring those students to Edsel. We have the space. We have to expand anyway, and that school and the staff there is underutilized, and some of our extracurricular activities are being damaged because of that. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. I love the echo. My name is Nafaila Haidar. I'm PTA Council President, and I'm a parent for Dearborn Schools. My daughters are supposed to go to Fortson. Do I want them to go to Edsel or Dearborn High? Absolutely. I would love to see them there, but only if I lived in that neighborhood. I don't want my daughter on a bus for 40 minutes in the morning. I don't want them there. I have a couple of different points I'm going to make. Some are mine, some are from the online community that's watching us through Facebook Live. The first one says, it's not mine, it does not make sense to increase class sizes at Edsel. It does make sense to reduce class sizes at the overcrowded schools. The other one is, research shows that the average cost to build a high school for 1,000 students is $45 million. Somebody's been looking. I've also been looking, and that's all I've come up with. Recently, West Bloomfield built a high school for 1,600 kids, and the cost for that school was $78 million. It didn't even get to $100 million. So I don't know why a high school for 1,000 kids in Dearborn is going to cost $120 million. And we don't go all out like West Bloomfield does. You know, they go top notch on everything.
I'd like to think we do in Dearborn.
Do we? Okay. I've been visiting other districts too. I'm jealous. Okay. So as of last week, 2 Mondays ago at the school board meeting, I went up to the podium and I made a suggestion to the board about St. Alphonsus. I had just finished walking through it. I have pictures and I'll be sharing them on my page. And I made that offer to the board. They didn't look very amused. St. Alphonsus is giving us the option to either lease the building or buy the building. If our excuse is that we're going to have a reduced population in 10 years, we have the option to lease the building until we're done with it and walk away. And then I received information from board members that the building was already sold. It's not, because as of last Wednesday, I received a call from a board member from St. Alphonsus, and they told me that it was not voted on to close on the building. So as of today, the building is still available if we want to make a move, and we're welcome to make an offer to buy or lease. Okay? Students at other forums have complained about the overcrowded busing. Having to sit 3 to 4, these are small seats and big kids, 3 to 4 per seat on a bus, going to school at 7 o'clock in the morning. I don't want anyone within 3 feet of me in the morning, let alone sit on a bus seat with 4 kids. So how does it make sense to put these kids on 21 buses and send them to Etzel every morning?
Just quick footnote on,
Sure.
on the buses. You know, the district has a policy, and I think Mark is here to, you know, to confirm that. We don't put more than 60 or 65 on a bus. Yeah.
Okay, I have pictures I can share. Kids from the buses have sent me pictures that I can share.
Okay, that's fine.
Last point, this one's mine. 2 weeks ago, we created a petition as parents. If anyone wants to see a 4th high school, a 9th grade academy, or a STEM academy built, please go on and sign my petition. I'll have it on my personal page and I'll post it on the PTA council page. So find me Nafaila Haidar on Facebook. And I've also emailed it to your PTA presidents if you want to get it from them. Or see me in a few, I'll show you where it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Nafila.
I'm back.
Can I say something?
Yes.
You are the reason why we are here, students.
Exactly.
Without you, we won't be us. Yeah, go ahead.
I just moved to this district to do middle school and high school. I went to an elementary school in a completely different district. So I know what it's like to move from one place to another and not know anybody. It's scary. I had a lot of trouble at school in my 6th grade year because I was so nervous. I didn't know anybody. I wasn't used to the atmosphere. Now that we're changing this, I'm worried that I have to get used to that all over again. I mean, I am one of these students, which is why I come up here, because it's important that you get my point of view. I'm one of these students that this is affecting. It's important that we keep these kids together because it's hard for them to deal with the new situation. It's hard to get into a whole new atmosphere, to get with different people. It changes you. I went from being an all-A student and a semi-okay student, I guess, to getting B's mostly, and now I'm back to A's. I don't want to go back to, I want this to affect not only my academic career, but my social career by changing where I go. Because not only is this affecting, yes, I won't be with the same kids and that's scary, but also it's affecting the way that I learn and what I'm used to. It's just something to consider. And again, this is coming from one of the kids that this is affecting. It's important to have these points of views.
Thank you so much. Thank you. We said we're gonna cut it off at 7:45. This will be the last question, of course, and we're gonna stay behind. If you have any specific questions, we're here till midnight. It doesn't matter to me, right, David? That's right. Okay, David is on. So go ahead.
My name is Lee Grizel, born and raised in Dearborn, except when I was in college away for 4 years. But I love the city. I had many opportunities to move away. I decided not to. Went to Whitmore Bowles, went to Stout Middle School, and Edsel Ford, proud graduate of Edsel Ford High School. Went to the Edsel Ford Forum, and my son and a bunch of the other football players for the Dearborn Thunderbirds showed up, and he watched like the presentation by some of the central administrators. And then we get home. He went home early, didn't stay for the whole thing. And the first thing he asked me is piggybacking on what Mr. Ford said. He said, and this is a 7th grade student here at this school right here at Smith. And he said, "Dad, which school is underpopulated?" Edsel Ford. Then why are they moving all the students away? This is a student who has gone through Dearborn Public Schools, learned problem solving. He took the most obvious way to solve the problem and did it, and yet 2 of the 3 proposals that central administration has given us totally throws that out the door. Common sense, which makes no sense at all. And so I was very happy that my son had that idea, and very sad that our central administration couldn't come up with those ideas. I do like Proposal 4, but if we are stuck with those 3 proposals, I would support Proposal 2. I also would like to mention one last thing. When I was a graduate of Edsel Ford High School back in 1994, Edsel Ford was a bigger school than Dearborn High. There was a smaller population at Dearborn High. And many of the issues that started with the overpopulation came about because there were a couple of family members at Dearborn High who also happened to be part of the Dearborn Public Schools, and they started to convince students to move to Dearborn High, like Edsel Ford wasn't a good school to go to. And then Dearborn started to allow school of choice. And it'd be okay if it was based on academic reasons or activity reasons and things like that. But many of these moves at that time started happening based on athletic reasons. And I went to Edsel Ford High School. I'm an Edsel Ford grad. I went to Kalamazoo College, which is a very difficult school to get into. And I can say that my education from Edsel Ford High School, I would have put it up against every single student at Kalamazoo College by far. I went to school with students who, had been at the country's best high schools. And like I said, my education at Edsel Ford, I felt was top-notch and equaled all of theirs. And yet, school of choice was allowed to send a lot of students away from Edsel Ford simply because of athletics. I thought my athletic career at Edsel Ford was great. I loved my coaches. I loved my teachers there. There were still some great teachers that I had at Edsel Ford. I think the community has shown up to talk about how great Edsel Ford is as a high school. And I would really like my kids to go to Edsel Ford High School as well. And unfortunately, Proposals 1 and 3 would take that option away. Not that Fordson and Dearborn aren't great schools, because I'm sure they are, but I prefer Proposal 2 or Proposal 4. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. Spoken like a true Thunderbird. Proud of you. Before we conclude, I would like to ask our superintendent to share with us some closing remarks. And rest assured, we understand the emotional capacity of this issue. It's a high charged capacity. And I want to thank each and every one of you for sharing your thoughts with us. And please keep it coming. This process will not end come Thursday evening, the last presentation at Bryant. It will continue for the following few months. Dr. Mileko?
Thank you, Mr. Jafer. First of all, I do want to thank Mr. Jafer and Mr. Mustin, and some of you have been at several of these, and they've been really doing a great job over, we're going to have 10 by the end of this week, and I want to thank also, we have several administrators, the team here, I know Mr. Breel. We also, I know it was mentioned, we have board members here, Trustee Thorpe, Trustee Berry, Trustee Lane, and Trustee Nasser, so we appreciate their support. I want to just, and I know they mentioned this at the beginning of the proposal, but this discussion has been ongoing since May, so it's something that will continue, and I appreciate your input here today. We've been listening to the feedback as we go. That's why we're spending all that time, spending hours going to the different schools, getting input. I can tell you that there have been no decisions made. There have been proposals that are being put before you, but now what's going to happen is my team, my administrative team, is going to go back. We're going to be disaggregating that data. We're going to provide, we've been providing rough data to the board, but what we're going to be doing is providing disaggregated data that we're going to give to them, and it'll be in a formal board presentation. It'll be the subject of many board meetings to come, this topic, and at the same token, because of some of the ideas and other things, we continue to collect data. There's been if you go to the website, there's been a tremendous amount of data that the board has gotten, that we've looked at, and guess what? That data continues to come in as different ideas are suggested. So our team will continue to investigate those options, and will provide that input and that feedback to the board, and then the hope is that, you know, we're going to make a decision that's going to support our students long term in this district. I just came from the Bryant just had a junior honors society, and one of the pillars, and I was here for Smith as well earlier, is leadership. And sometimes in leadership, there is going to be tough decisions that have to be made. This is one of them. But it is going to be a test of leadership within the city, within the people of the city, with the board, with our administration, to get through it, and we are. And at that point, too, we're going to have some, people aren't going to like certain things. We know that. There is no perfect plan. That's the reality. There really isn't. But now that we've seen your feedback and the input, and we have 2 more to go, we're going to take that back to our team, and we're going to come up with some different ideas and present that information to the board, and that's the direction that the board gave me and my team. So again, I want to thank all of you for being here. I appreciate the passion for students that you showed, and the fact is that, you know, for me, it would be, if we didn't have people coming and showing that, it would say that, you know, look, there's no care and concern for the schools, but there is, because you care about your students. So I want to just thank all of you for being here tonight and giving your input, and I hope you have a great night.